Second level of attention we gave to this, beyond the public education piece, was intervention. And so what we did is we created what we call the DA mediation program. And essentially I assigned prosecutors to go and meet with the parents when the school district was meeting with these parents of children who were chronically and habitually truant. And I will share with you that when we created this initiative, I asked lawyers in my office to volunteer to do this work of collaboration with the school district. And interestingly enough, it was the prosecutors in my office who are experts in gang prosecution and homicide prosecutions that were the first to raise their hand and say, we'd like to participate. And so, of course, those prosecutors also understood that to be most effective, they would sit in those meetings, and I asked them when they did to look very mean, which meant invariably that the parent said to the school district official, who's the mean-looking dude, and they told them, well, that's someone, that mean DA, Kamala Harrison over here, because she said she's going to start prosecuting you if we can't work this out. But what we also did is we engaged through the collaboration with the school district, and I cannot thank Carlos Garcia, our superintendent, enough for his leadership and vision. We, through this process of the threat of prosecution, engaged these parents in mediation that resulted in giving them the training and the support that they needed regarding a number of factors, which could include anything from a parent being homeless to a substance abuse issue, to the need to have support to have a babysitter for the younger children, and coordinating that for the parent. The final stage, beyond the public education and the intervention, was, as I've mentioned, using the stick that we have in prosecution, and that meant prosecuting parents. This stage of response to the issue of truancy is reserved for those parents who have not responded to any of the other intervening steps, which include multiple outreach attempts to have them come in and talk about what is causing them this issue. And I would like to also point out that when we're talking about elementary school truants, Senator, we have seen cases, and the typical case is a case involving a 6-year-old who misses 40, 50, 60, 80 days of a 180-day school year. So when we are discussing this issue, this is not simply some kid playing hooky. We are talking about a very young child missing an extraordinary amount of what that child should receive in terms of education. And so in the prosecution phase, we charge the parents. We have created a truancy court in San Francisco, and basically a judge will then sit over the case and ask what is going on from the parent. It may be also that there's a CPS worker involved in the life of that child. And so the judge is going to ask what's being done over there. And essentially, through the power and the attention of the court, we are finding that, for the most part, those cases where we have had to go through prosecution, the parents are inclined to enter a deferred entry of judgment and then go into services to improve the attendance of the child. Over the course of our initiative, which is the public education, the intervention, and prosecution piece, over 2 years, we have improved the attendance for children by 20% in San Francisco. So we see that it is working. And what I'd like to leave this committee with is a couple of thoughts about what I believe we can do as a state as we go forward on this issue. One is we should, I believe, consider the fact that we know that usually we identify a problem because someone has quantified it or measured it for us. But if we don't have the ability to quantify and measure the problem, we can't sufficiently and appropriately address it. That being said, in the state of California right now, we are not and do not have the data to measure this issue of chronic truancy among elementary school children. And I'd like to suggest to this committee that we as a state adopt a uniform standard for tracking and collecting attendance data on elementary school students in this state so we can flag these issues early. Second, right now the state law in California designates truancy as 3 or more unexcused absences. But I would suggest to this committee that there is a very big difference between 3 or more unexcused absences and 50 unexcused absences, and I believe the law should make a provision for that. And in fact, we should approach this issue as we do an early emergency response, and then let's have code red for certain situations, code yellow for others. But we should not look at this as monolithic, because the point is obvious. A child, an elementary school child missing 3 days of school versus an elementary school child missing 50 days of school is a very different issue.
Too far broad a stroke.
Absolutely right. And so what I'd like to suggest is this committee consider amending the code so that we recognize truancy and then make a distinction between that and chronic truancy. And finally, as we go forward, I believe that we, based on everything we've seen in our prosecutions of these cases, should, as a state, recognize that when a child, an elementary school child, is chronically truant, that it is a form of neglect of that child. And I'd like to suggest that this committee consider looking at the issue of chronic truancy of elementary school children, and in particular identify and define that as neglect of that child, so that we as prosecutors can have the tool to deal with that issue appropriately. And finally, I would like to again thank this committee for recognizing that this seemingly small issue that impacts very small people in a very short period of time becomes a very big issue that becomes, in fact, one of the priorities of our criminal justice resources and diminishing resources. And I believe that if we take this issue on, we can actually see huge rewards in terms of, again, public resources, public safety, and also a productive workforce. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we'll have the